Happy Wednesday, Dilettanters. I will start by talking about books. As I've mentioned several times, The Fault in Our Stars is my favourite book of all time. I think it's John Green's magnum opus, if you will, and it's just sort of just a huge collection of all the feels is pretty much the best way to describe it. I just love John Green's writing and how believable his teenagers are, and the way that he has his characters deal with things that people in that age range really shouldn't have to deal with, and how he sort of teaches us a lesson about how we live our lives and the morals we use and just things like that. And it's almost unquantifiable, really. I think you need to read it, whoever you are. Everyone should read this book. My second favourite book is Catcher in the Rye, because it's just such a fantastic example of a coming-of-age novel. And I really felt comfortable with the genre, and I felt like it was just a normal person. There wasn't anything extraordinary going on in Holden's life in particular. It was just his views on the world and him growing up and him becoming a slightly better person, but he's still a little bit wacky. Similar to how Hazel and Augustus's in The Fault in Our Stars opinions can help shape my life, I felt like The Catcher in the Rye could help people my age to avoid some tropes of our generation and sort of get over obstacles that people have already been over easier. Also, it is quite funny. I did a 20-minute monologue for drama on Catcher in the Rye where I essentially abridged the whole story, and I feel doing something like that really helps you to understand a piece. I think once you've got in and you've played the character, then you can see the true meaning, and it's one of those books that you sort of do have to sit there and pore over, and then you might have to do some character exercises with, and then you'll fully understand what a fantastic book it is. My third favourite book is The Great Gatsby. As John Green did in his Vlogbros videos, you can pick that book for meaning, and I have done it a couple of times and I've gone through it and I've looked for metaphors, and it is an enjoyable book, but that's not really the reason I like it. The reason I like it is a much shallower reason, in that it's so much fun to read. It's just really rich people being completely ridiculous in the 40s or the 50s or whenever it's set, and it's just so much fun because it's completely out of what I experience in day-to-day life, and it gives me such a fantastic sense of escapism. And I don't know, I just think I would recommend anyone to read it, just because you can sit and think about it, or you can not, and you can just have a blast and just read Gatsby on the train and laugh at some crazy drunk people. I'm a bit sceptical about the movie though, simply because Baz Luhrmann's directing it and the trailer looks absolutely nothing like I imagined Gatsby to be in my head. Jenna and Kat, you both mentioned paper towns, and I would agree with you there. I don't think it's the best thing he's ever written, but there are certain things in it about imagining people complexly and what a terrible thing it is to think of a person as more than a person that have almost completely changed how I think about everybody, all people, forever. So I suppose that deserves a mention and is very much worth reading. I will admit that I didn't actually like Shakespeare at first, because I didn't really want to look past the difficult language and the metaphor and the meaning, and I just thought it was all a bit too difficult for somebody of the young age that I was when I read it. And I continued not to like it until I was actually in a Shakespeare play. I played Stefano, who's a drunk, in The Tempest, and it was just so much fun, and when you've read through it a few times, and you completely understand the story and everything that's going on, he's such a fantastic writer, and I really need to get hold of some scripts or get them on Kindle or something. Although, like you, Jenna, I don't really like Romeo and Juliet. I think that's mainly because I've seen the Luhrmann movie like 3 times, and it's the worst thing I've ever had to sit through. And we had to assess it for English, and it was just, oh, I just wanted to die. When it comes to poetry, I like pretty much any poem, as long as it's not completely ridiculous. I like that in poetry you can be bound by rhyme and patterns, but you can also just completely chuck that out the window, or you can use a combination of two. It's almost like songs in a way that's just a quick little story or a quick little idea, and you can just throw it across in any way you want. You can have a haiku, you could have a long epic poem, or you could just have a couple of lines about, I don't know, the weather. It's great. I've seen them a couple of times, but I never really considered them poems, but now after your explanation, Jenna, I do. I quite like blackout poems, and I like the way that sort of the poet, as it were, is limited in saying what they want to say within somebody else's text. Like, if you wanted to explain how you felt for a girl, for example, you'd have to find somebody else's text which has your feelings in them and then arrange them in the right order, and it must take a hell of a long time, if nothing else. So I appreciate it on that value, and of course it looks nice and is interesting to read. Specifically, I do really like the works of Edgar Allan Poe and William Wormsworth. William Wordsworth, the zombie, William Wordsworth. Although I talked about music a fair bit already, I'd like to talk about some more music. And that's music with a very intense narrative. A great example of this would be the Decemberists. They're a sort of indie folk rock outfit thingamabobby. Their albums are often centred around a key idea or a theme, like The Hazards of Love, for example, where every song correlates to this main story, which involves love, loss, falling in love, lots of dancing apparently, abduction, and even infanticide, scarily enough. And then those children that are murdered come back to sing at the end, and it's all fine and great and all lovely. And it's just a fantastic thing that you can do with music. You can make something so much more than a song, that it's like it's contributing to something bigger, which is the album. I really like Little Miss Sunshine and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Those are two fantastic movies and some of my favourites. And a film I watched recently, which you guys may like, is called Garden State, and it was written, starred in and directed by Zach Braff, who's JD from Scrubs, and it's just so fantastic and sort of has a brilliant soundtrack and is just a really weird and individual story. So you should go watch that too. As for fan fiction, I've never written any because it's sort of a bit weird, and I would only write it about like The Fault in Our Stars or like Catcher in the Rye or 1984 or something weird. I wouldn't write it about like real people. And I've read a couple, and the only reason I've read them was not because I was super interested in the people, but mainly because it was really, really well written. Like almost author level of well written, and there was things with it. It wasn't just, oh, here's Alex Day, oh, let's make out. It was like there was a girl and there's reasons why she couldn't go with him, and then he helps her to resolve their reasons, or at least sort of does, because it's not actually finished yet. But you know, I'll put a link to that down below too, so you can have a look at that. I've rambled on for long enough anyway, so I shall say DFTBA, and Zoe, I'll see you tomorrow.